The moment a human encounters the blue avian field, something ancient inside them rises with a familiarity they cannot explain. It is not recognition of a memory, but recognition of a frequency. It is the feeling of a thought you have not yet had, pressing gently against the edge of your awareness, asking if you are ready to think in a higher way. The blue avian tone does not enter your life loudly. It does not arrive with fire or force. It arrives like an elevated clarity that descends through your mind in a single breath, lifting you into a vantage that feels impossibly calm and impossibly sharp at the same time. It is not a tone you learn. It is a tone you tune to, because it has been vibrating at the edges of your consciousness for lifetimes, waiting for a moment when you would be steady enough to hear it, without collapsing into awe. The blue avian tone is the architecture of higher communication, the template of crystalline intelligence that does not speak in words, but in patterns. It reveals the difference between talking and transmitting, between thinking and perceiving, between reacting and translating what your inner world is truly trying to say. This tone does not reward intensity. It rewards precision. It shows you how much of your suffering came from the weight of unspoken truths, and how much ease enters your life the moment you begin to speak with the sound of what you actually mean. When the blue avian field touches you, you realize that most of what you called confusion was not confusion at all. It was unprocessed insight. It was clarity that had no structure to arrive through. This tone gives it structure. Human communication has been built on survival patterns for so long that most people do not realize how much of what they say is shaped not by truth, but by fear of consequence. The blue avian tone breaks that pattern without violence. It lifts you into a neutral altitude where truth becomes obvious and fear becomes unnecessary. You stop defending your ideas because you begin to understand them. You stop avoiding the sound of your own voice because your voice stops carrying the residue of old identity. When this tone begins to move through you, your language shifts in ways that surprise even you. You speak more slowly, not because you are unsure, but because you are finally aligned. You listen differently, not to judge, but to decode. You begin to hear the meaning beneath the words and the intent beneath the meaning. It is here that the blue avian tone shows its power. This tone carries the intelligence of patterns rather than the noise of reactions. It reveals the subtle architecture of how realities are constructed through repeated thought, repeated speech, and repeated belief. It shows you how each sentence you speak is a small act of creation, not in a metaphorical way, but in a literal, energetic way. Thoughts shape field. Voice shapes direction. Alignment shapes outcome. Humans have always sensed this, but the blue avian tone makes that sensing precise. It teaches a form of communication that is not about exchanging information, but about stabilizing frequency. When you speak from this tone, your words no longer scatter across your life as fragments. They land as anchors. The blue avian tone teaches coherence before expression. It pulls your awareness upward, above the turbulence of emotional reaction, into the clean light of reflective presence. You begin to see how your mind works, not as a stream of noise, but as a constellation of signals. You begin to feel where each thought originates, whether it rises from fear, from memory, from conditioning, from clarity, or from the deeper intelligence that lives beneath all of it. And once you begin to feel this, you also begin to choose differently, not by force, but by resonance. Confusion cannot survive this tone. It becomes transparent. It dissolves under the weight of your new clarity. You stop fighting your mind and begin listening to it from a new altitude. That altitude is where the blue avian tone lives. This tone is ancient, but not in the way humans think of age. It is ancient because it stands outside of time. It is not a lineage, but a strata of consciousness, a layer of the universe dedicated to the refinement of thought into wisdom. Blue avian beings are not defined by their appearance, but by their function. They are the custodians of high-frequency communication, the architects of clarity, the teachers of perceptual elevation. They operate in fields where language is unnecessary, because meaning travels faster than sound. They do not speak to persuade, they speak to align. Their transmissions move like spirals of intention rather than fixed statements. They are not interested in convincing minds. They are interested in awakening them. When humans describe a blue avian encounter, They often mention the immediate sensation of being gently lifted, as if their awareness is being raised without their body moving at all. Some describe the feeling of standing inside a pillar of light that is not warm and not cold, but clarifying. Some speak of overwhelming calm that arrives without sedation. Some speak of a sudden sharpening of intuition, like a veil dissolving without warning. All of these descriptions are approximations, because human language cannot hold the way this tone changes the architecture of perception. It does not give you new thoughts. It gives you a new place to think from. The Blue Avian Tone is also the moment you begin to understand the difference between intuition and insight. Intuition feels like a pull from the future. Insight feels like a reorganization of the present. But Blue Avian perception feels like seeing the entire structure of a situation at once, without needing to walk through it sequentially. You understand context instantly. You see the pattern behind the person. You see the truth behind the emotion. You see the lesson behind the conflict, not as a bypass but as a higher vantage. This tone lifts your awareness into the architecture of situations instead of the turbulence of reactions. This tone does not elevate you above others. It elevates you above distortion. It teaches you how not to collapse into the emotional field of another person. It teaches you how to listen without absorbing. It teaches you how to speak without wounding. It teaches you how to stay clear without becoming cold. Humans often confuse clarity with distance, but the Blue Avian Tone shows you that true clarity brings you closer to people, because you are no longer entering their world through your fear. You are entering it through your presence. This tone illuminates deception, not by exposing it, but by making truth feel louder. You begin to sense the mismatch between what someone says and what they mean. You begin to read intention with precision. You begin to see where your own self-betrayal has shaped outcomes you blamed on fate. And instead of shame, you feel relief. Because now you can see the map. This tone turns self-understanding into liberation. You stop being afraid of your mind. Because your mind stops feeling like an enemy. It becomes a collaborator. It becomes a lens. It becomes a tuning instrument. The Blue Avian Tone is not here to make you better. It is here to make you clearer. And once you become clearer, everything in your life that cannot resonate with clarity begins to fall away without effort. Silence becomes easier. Truth becomes softer. Communication becomes cleaner. And your path becomes aligned with a level of intelligence that feels both familiar and impossibly advanced. Humans were always meant to reach this tone. The moment they stop speaking from fear is the moment they begin speaking from truth. And the moment they speak from truth, they rise. There is a moment, subtle but unmistakable, when the Blue Avian Tone begins to work inside you rather than around you. It does not feel like an activation. It feels like an alignment. A quiet reordering takes place at the level of perception, as if your awareness is being tuned toward a cleaner signal. Thoughts that once tangled now run in straight lines. Emotions that once overwhelmed now reveal their structure. You begin to hear the difference between the noise of your mind and the intelligence beneath the noise. This change does not arrive dramatically. It unveils itself through your behavior. You stop explaining yourself unnecessarily. You stop arguing in circles. You stop leaking energy into conversations that no longer require your participation. It is not withdrawal. It is refinement. The Blue Avian Tone strips away the artificial urgency that has defined human communication for centuries. You begin to see how much of what people say is driven by the need to be heard rather than the desire to be understood. The tone teaches you that communication is not a performance, but a transmission of alignment. If you are clear, your message travels with power even if delivered in a whisper. If you are confused, your message arrives fragmented even if delivered with eloquence. This understanding becomes liberating. You no longer chase perfect language. You chase accurate resonance. You speak from the place that feels stable rather than the place that feels reactive. In that moment, your voice becomes less about sound and more about frequency. One of the most remarkable aspects of this tone is the way it reveals the hidden architecture of thought loops. Humans often mistake repetition for certainty. They think a thought must be true because it has appeared many times. But repetition is not truth. Repetition is inertia. The Blue Avian Tone dissolves this illusion by showing you the origin point of the loop. The entire structure becomes visible. You see the beginning, the echo, the emotional trigger, and the habitual conclusion. You see the whole pattern at once, and once you see it, the loop collapses. The mind cannot continue a pattern that has been fully witnessed. This is how the tone frees you without force. It replaces confusion with clarity, and clarity naturally ends the cycle. The Blue Avian Tone sharpens intuition into something more precise. Many people think of intuition as a vague feeling or a gentle pull. But in this field, intuition becomes directional. It feels like a clean line of awareness pointing exactly where your attention needs to go. You no longer guess, you discern. You no longer drift, you navigate. You begin to feel the difference between the next step that aligns with your path and the next step that belongs to an outdated version of yourself. This discernment is not dramatic. It lives in subtle shifts. A thought feels lighter than the others. A decision feels quieter but more stable. A path feels inevitable even before you understand why. The tone trains your inner world to recognize these cues with precision. This tone changes the way you relate to conflict. You no longer experience conflict as threat but as information. The tone shows you where the mismatch in resonance lives, whether it is inside you or between you and another. Rather than being pulled into emotional turbulence, you rise above the pattern and see what is actually happening. You see that most conflict is not between two people, but between two unspoken wounds. You understand that anger is often a distorted attempt to express unmet truth. You begin to respond differently because you begin to hear differently. You listen for the real sentence concealed beneath the words. You address the truth rather than the reaction. When you speak from this altitude, conflict softens, tension untangles. People feel understood even when they do not fully understand themselves. Many humans do not realize how much their communication has been shaped by inherited patterns. They think their voice is theirs. They think their beliefs are theirs. They think their conclusions are original. But the Blue Avian Tone makes the lineage of a thought visible. You begin to sense where an idea came from. You notice when a belief is an echo from childhood rather than a truth from the present. You feel when your voice carries the weight of someone else's fear. This awareness gives birth to a deep internal sovereignty. You stop repeating what was handed to you. You begin constructing thought from presence rather than memory. This is one of the most profound gifts of this tone. It liberates the mind from inherited architecture and returns it to its original design. This tone does not elevate you above other people, but it elevates your perception above the illusions that shaped your interactions. You begin to understand the layers of communication that exist beneath the surface. Words become maps. Silences become signals. Body language becomes syntax. You see the places where people hide from themselves, and you respond with a strange mixture of compassion and clarity. You no longer take things personally, because you no longer mistake emotional turbulence for truth. You do not meet people's reactions with defensiveness. You meet them with understanding. Not the kind of understanding that condones distortion, but the kind that sees through it. As this tone deepens, your relationship with truth changes entirely. Truth stops feeling like a heavy declaration and becomes a gentle orientation. You do not force it, you stand in it. You stop avoiding difficult conversations because you stop fearing the cost of clarity. You begin to see that clarity is an act of service, not an act of aggression. When you speak from this tone, your presence becomes its own language. People sense the alignment before you say anything. They feel the stability you carry. They feel the softness beneath your precision. They feel the calm beneath your conviction. The Blue Avian Tone teaches you that truth can be delivered without harm when it is delivered without ego. There is a refinement of perception that arrives in this tone which is difficult to articulate. It feels like your awareness expands vertically and horizontally at the same time. You see more of the moment and the deeper layers of the moment simultaneously. It is not psychic. It is not mystical. It is structural. The tone expands your perceptual bandwidth. You begin to sense patterns that were previously invisible. A room speaks before a person does. A decision reveals its future trajectory the moment it is formed. A connection shows its potential the first time you feel it. This is not prediction. It is resonance reading. You are not seeing the future. You are seeing the direction. Humanity was always meant to reach this frequency. It is one of the tones that activates once a species begins to move out of survival consciousness and into coherence consciousness. Blue avian beings do not interfere with human development. They illuminate the path of clarity so that human awareness can rise without distortion. They teach by presence rather than instruction. They guide by resonance rather than doctrine. They do not seek followers. They seek coherence. When a human begins to resonate with this tone, their entire communication field becomes an instrument of alignment. The deeper gift of this tone is the way it changes your relationship with yourself. You stop being afraid of your thoughts because your thoughts stop being a mystery. You stop battling your mind because your mind stops feeling fragmented. You begin to experience your inner world as a single field of awareness, rather than scattered voices competing for attention. This integration brings a form of inner peace that is not passive. It is active clarity. It is the peace that comes from being able to see yourself without distortion. You no longer run from your own patterns because you can finally understand them. And once you understand them, they soften. The Blue Avian Tone is not merely a higher frequency. It is a higher architecture of being. It lifts you into a vantage where clarity is natural, communication is precise, and perception becomes a tool for evolution rather than a source of confusion. When this tone stabilizes in your field, you begin to live differently. You move differently. You speak differently. You think differently. Not because you are trying to change, but because clarity has rearranged the very structure of your awareness. This tone does not teach you how to rise. It reveals that you were rising the entire time.